You have a power within you, a fire that never truly dies. It may flicker, it may dim, but it is always there, waiting. And when you least expect it, there's a moment, a thought, a challenge that becomes the spark. It adds fuel to your flame. You may already believe you understand the limits of your own potential, that you've mapped the borders of your strength. But let me tell you, what you believe is merely the surface. Beneath that surface is a vast ocean of untapped force and unrealized ability. There's something inside you that doesn't break, not really. It might go quiet, it might feel distant, but it's never gone. That part of you that kept going when things got dark, it's still here. And whether you know it or not, you've barely scratched the surface of what you're capable of. Most people live their whole lives trapped under a version of themselves that isn't even close to their full strength. They accept limits that were handed to them. But what if those limits weren't real? What if the doubts, the fears, the setbacks, they weren't signs of who you are, but tests meant to wake up what's already within you? You think you've seen what you're made of. You haven't. Because right below the noise of overthinking and underestimating, there's a deeper self, calm, focused, unshaken. And that version of you, it's built on the kind of inner power the Stoics talked about. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, grounded, real. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Today we're going there, to that strength, not the surface level stuff, the real thing. And if any part of you feels like you're ready to stop doubting and start becoming, then stay with me. This video might be the spark that lights everything up again. One simple, free favor I'll ask. If this resonates, if you feel like this is the kind of space you want to grow in, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. Let's get into it. Why do you think you doubt yourself? Not because you're incapable, not because you're broken, but because somewhere along the way, you forgot just how much you've already been through and how much you've quietly conquered. Doubt doesn't come from weakness. It comes from disconnection, from losing touch with the part of you that's been showing up day after day, without applause, without permission, without validation. That part of you that got out of bed when everything felt heavy, that kept moving forward when your mind screamed, "Stop." That smiled at others while you were silently carrying what felt like the weight of the world. Most people never see that strength in themselves, not because it isn't there, but because they've been trained not to look for it. You weren't born unsure of yourself. You learned hesitation like a second language. It crept in slowly, through the subtle warnings to tone it down, to stay safe, to not get your hopes up. Maybe it started at school, or home, or in the way you watched others get punished for standing out. It's not your fault. But now, it's your responsibility to unlearn it. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What have you been repeatedly doing? Dismissing yourself, second-guessing, playing small. But here's the thing. Beneath the noise of all that doubt, there's always been another voice. A quieter one. One that doesn't yell, but whispers at the right moments. That voice that shows up when the distractions die down. The one that says, "This isn't all I am. I was made for more than this." Have you ever sat in silence and felt it rising? Not as ego, but as truth. And if that voice has survived all the years you've tried to silence it with fear and overthinking, then so has the strength that carried you through. You've endured more than you realize. Moments where quitting would have been easier, nights you carried a storm inside and still showed up the next morning like the sky was clear. That's not weakness. That's resilience. That's grit. That's proof. Carl Jung wrote, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You've been choosing, even in silence, and those choices are shaping you. The problem isn't your lack of confidence. It's your lack of memory. You've forgotten your own evidence, forgotten the strength buried in those ordinary, uncelebrated days where you kept going. You adapted, you healed in pieces. You moved forward when nothing made sense. That kind of strength doesn't disappear. It only gets ignored. We ignore it because we're trained to trust criticism more than capability. Compliments are dismissed. Achievements are downplayed. And over time, a quiet narrative takes hold, one that says, I'm not enough, even when the facts say otherwise. Socrates believed, the unexamined life is not worth living. But the unexamined self is where most suffering begins. If you never pause to reflect on everything you've overcome, how can you believe in what you're capable of next? There was a time you felt invincible, not because life was perfect, but because you were in touch with a deeper truth. Maybe you were a kid, running without fear, speaking without apology. Or maybe it was just a brief moment during hardship, when something in you stood tall and steady. That wasn't ego. That was clarity. That was you. That spark didn't disappear. It didn't burn out. It simply got buried beneath the opinions you never asked for, the criticism you didn't deserve, the failures you mistook for definitions, and the fog of life, the noise, the pressure, the expectations. It just made it harder to hear yourself. But let's be clear, you didn't lose your fire, you just stopped feeding it. And fire, real fire, the kind that lives in your chest and refuses to quit, it doesn't die easily. It doesn't go out with one setback or even 1,000. It retreats, it waits, it smolders until you're ready to remember that it was never gone. All it takes is a choice, not a loud, dramatic one, but a quiet, firm decision to believe again, not in some ideal version of yourself, but in the core that's always been there. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That invincibility you once felt, that wasn't a dream. That was your heart speaking clearly, before the world gave you reasons to doubt. So maybe it's time to stop looking out there for validation and start looking within for recognition. You are not starting over. You are returning. You are not broken. You are buried under stories that were never yours to carry. Let them go. Reclaim that voice, the one that doesn't need to be loud to be certain, the one that whispers, "I am not done. I am just remembering." The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. Volume doesn't equal power. It often covers insecurity. The real kind of strength? It moves without announcement. It doesn't beg to be seen because it's too busy building. True confidence isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and unmoved by who's watching. It's not the one making a scene. It's the one making progress. You've been conditioned to think that if no one notices, it doesn't count. That if you don't post about it, it didn't happen. But that's not growth. That's performance. Confidence isn't about proving something. It's about knowing something. And when you know, you don't need the world to clap. You just need to keep showing up. Day after day, when the spotlight isn't there, when no one's cheering, when it's just you and the work, that's where real power takes shape. Plato said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power," but I'd add, especially when no one's watching, because the world will always notice eventually. But the version of you who needs to notice first is you. So if you're building something and nobody sees it yet, good. Let them miss it. Let them overlook you. Let your silence confuse them. Let your discipline disturb them. One day they'll ask how you got there, but by then your answer will already be written in the results. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll try when I'm ready"? Maybe you didn't say it out loud, but you've thought it, that you need to feel more confident, more experienced, more prepared before you take that leap. But readiness, it's not something you wait for. It doesn't show up like a guest who rings the doorbell and announces itself. Readiness is something you build, not through thinking, but through doing. You don't become ready and then act. You act, and through that action, you become ready. Every person you admire, every story that inspired you, none of them began with certainty. They began with hesitation. They began in fear. They just didn't let that fear stop them. They moved anyway, and in that movement, they became. As Aristotle said, we learn by doing, not by waiting, not by doubting, but by engaging with the very thing that terrifies us. Fear has a clever disguise. It often wears the face of logic. It tells you to be practical, to wait for a better time, to gather more data, get more approval, feel more prepared. But what if all of that is just fear speaking with a polished accent? What if that hesitation isn't protecting you, it's paralyzing you? Because your future self, the one that's more grounded, more capable, more fulfilled, isn't waiting for the perfect moment. It's calling you forward now, right from the place where you feel most unsure. So if you're scared, good. That means you're alive. That means you're close to something important. Discomfort is not a red flag. It's a signal. It means you're on the edge of growth, standing at the boundary between who you are and who you're about to become. And you don't wait to become worthy of that transformation. You act your way into it. Worthiness isn't something that gets handed to you. It's earned in the trenches of uncertainty, in the choices you make when nothing feels guaranteed. You don't find your confidence and then show up. You show up scared and unready. And through showing up again and again, you become confident. Every time you say, "I can't," your nervous system listens. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fact-check. It accepts the command and begins wiring itself around that limitation. Your body tenses. Your breath shortens. Your mind begins shrinking its expectations. And if you repeat it often enough, it doesn't just become a belief. It becomes a blueprint, one your actions start to follow without question. That's the tricky thing about doubt. It doesn't shout. It whispers, quietly, casually. Maybe I'm just not built for this. I've never been good at that. It's probably too late for me. It sounds like you. It feels like logic. But it's fear, fear in disguise, slipping past your guard by pretending it's being rational. But what if you started treating your thoughts like suggestions instead of truth? What if you questioned them, not with panic, but with curiosity? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Most of us are being led by thoughts we never chose, never examined, and never challenged. They were passed down by teachers, parents, culture, voices that became our internal narration before we even knew we were allowed to question them. So the next time you hear that inner voice say, "You're not enough," stop. Don't absorb it. Ask, whose voice is that really? Is it a tired version of yourself speaking from a place of exhaustion? Is it someone else's projection from years ago that still lingers in your system? Because once you identify the source, you weaken its grip. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. You are the thinker, not the thought. And that means you have power. Not to control every thought that comes, but to decide which ones stay, which ones you keep, which ones you build your life around. Your mind is a space, a sacred one. And just like your home, it collects clutter, self-doubt, fear, shame. They pile up when left unchecked. But you can clean it. You can create mental order by being intentional, by replacing noise with clarity, assumptions with questions, judgment with understanding. Your power begins the moment you stop being an echo and start being the editor, the author, the one who chooses the script, not just repeats the one that was handed down. You scroll, you stare, you see them, achieving, building, glowing with success in perfectly filtered moments. And without meaning to, you start shrinking, not physically, but emotionally, internally. You compare their victories to your doubts, their milestones to your mess, their highlight reel to your behind the scenes, and suddenly it feels like you're falling behind in a race you didn't even realize you were running. But here's the truth. Comparison is a thief. It doesn't just steal joy, it takes your focus, your gratitude, your momentum, and trades it for anxiety, envy, and a quiet sense of not enough. And the worst part? Most of it isn't even real. You're comparing your full humanity to someone else's edited glimpse, your struggles to their curated success. It's an unfair fight from the start. The Stoics saw this clearly. They believed that the good life wasn't about how much you had, but how well you lived. Epictetus taught that we should never tie our worth to things outside of our control, especially not other people's achievements. He said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And yet we hand over our inner peace every time we use someone else's progress as a ruler for our own. But you are not behind, you are on your path. One with its own rhythm, its own pace, and its own lessons. You were never meant to match anyone else's timeline. Aristotle believed that each person's purpose, what he called telos, was unique. Trying to replicate someone else's purpose is like planting a tree and expecting it to bloom like a flower. It's not wrong, it's just not you. The only competition that actually matters is with the person you were yesterday. Are you learning? Are you growing? Are you trying, even just a little? If so, you're not losing, you're evolving. And progress measured in self-awareness and small steps is more meaningful than any spotlight moment ever posted online. What you think you need right now isn't more motivation. It's memory. Not a pep talk, not a new mantra, just a quiet, honest remembering of everything you've already made it through. Because if you could look back clearly, really look, you'd realize you've survived so much more than you give yourself credit for. The days that cracked you but didn't collapse you. The nights you laid awake with doubt in your chest and still woke up, still got dressed, still carried on when quitting would have been easier. That's your resume, not your titles, not your metrics. Your proof lies in your perseverance. Resilience isn't some rare gift that only the strong are born with. It's a decision, repeated daily. It's the choice to keep going when things don't make sense, when everything in you says stop, and you respond quietly, not yet. It's forged in the fire of fatigue, refined in the pressure of fear, and proven in the presence of failure. Plato once said, "Courage is knowing what not to fear." But maybe real courage is fearing it all and walking through it anyway. You're stronger than you feel, not because someone told you so, but because you've practiced strength when no one noticed. The kind of strength that doesn't get shared on social media. The kind that doesn't come with rewards or recognition. The kind that's lived in private, behind closed doors, in hard moments you didn't think you'd make it through, but did. That's where confidence is born, not in speeches, not in applause, but in your ability to stand up one more time after life tries to knock you flat. Your confidence isn't something you build when it's easy, it's something you earn in the dark. The mind is your battlefield, and your sanctuary. It can be the place where chaos multiplies or where clarity takes root. It's not just where your thoughts live, it's where your future is built. And more often than not, it's not the actual problems in your life that undo you. It's the interpretation of those problems. It's the way your mind tells the story. The spin, the fear, the assumption, that's where the spiral begins. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But what about the unexamined thought? That one sentence you repeat to yourself without even noticing. "I'm not ready. They're better than me. This always happens to me." These quiet phrases, left unchecked, become the script you act out day after day, not because they're true, but because they're familiar. But you can reclaim the gate. You can stop letting every thought walk in unchecked. You can become the gatekeeper of your mind, the one who decides what gets to stay, what gets questioned, and what gets rewritten. That begins in stillness, not silence necessarily, but awareness. Creating space between stimulus and response, between thought and belief. Start auditing your beliefs, not to judge them, but to understand them. Where did they come from? Who handed them to you? Do they reflect truth or just old programming? Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But facing your mind is the beginning of freedom. Not a glamorous process, but a liberating one. Clean your mental language. Speak to yourself like someone you're responsible for. Journal, not to impress yourself, but to see yourself clearly. Stop writing what you hope is true and start writing what is, so you can move toward what can be. Don't just feed your mind with content. Train it with intention. Practice thinking, practice noticing, practice replacing. Because a trained mind doesn't panic at challenge, it pauses. It doesn't react to every opinion, it filters. It doesn't chase control, it seeks clarity. A trained mind won't save you from every problem, but it will protect you from the worst of all, the ones you invent. You've tied your worth to outcomes, to the job offer, the number, the applause. You've looked to results like they were mirrors, hoping they'd reflect back the validation you've been chasing. And when they didn't, you started shrinking, assuming that if the result wasn't great, you must not be either. But the truth is, outcomes are liars. They don't always tell the whole story. They're shaped by timing, by luck, by variables outside your control. And if you live by them, you'll die by them. One high will never feel high enough. One failure will feel like a verdict. And you'll stay stuck in a cycle of chasing worth from things that were never meant to define you. The Stoics knew this long before algorithms and awards. Marcus Aurelius didn't measure his life by victories in battle or praise from the Senate. He measured it by whether he lived in alignment with virtue, whether his actions came from integrity, not impulse. They believed power wasn't in the outcome, but in the process. Epictetus said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Then you will be happy." That's not passivity. That's peace. You are not your wins. You are not your losses. You are who you are in the face of both. You are the effort, not the echo. The decision, not the result. Detachment is misunderstood. People think it means you don't care. But real detachment means you care deeply. You just don't collapse when things don't go your way. You give your best. You commit fully. But you don't let the result control your self-worth. That's not apathy. That's mastery. You can love something and still let go of the outcome. You can give your all and still be okay if it doesn't land. That's the kind of strength that isn't shaken by external changes, because it's anchored in internal stability. You don't need to jump. That's the myth. That transformation comes in one massive movie scene moment where everything shifts and the music swells. But real life doesn't work that way. Growth isn't one big act. It's a series of small, honest ones. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to take the next step. The one right in front of you. The one that feels hard but true. Courage isn't always heroic. It's not always a grand speech or a bold confrontation. Sometimes courage is whispering no when your whole body wants to say yes just to be liked. Sometimes it's writing one true sentence when your self-doubt says delete. Sometimes it's just getting up, putting your feet on the floor, facing the day even when everything in you wants to disappear. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself, and that victory doesn't come all at once. It comes in quiet, repeated decisions to act in truth, even when fear is louder." You don't build a new identity in a moment. You build it by showing up as someone slightly stronger than yesterday. And every time you do, something subtle but powerful shifts. You start to see yourself differently, not as the one who always doubts, but as the one who acts anyway. And the moment you start seeing yourself as capable, as courageous, even in the small things, that's when everything changes. Because identity shapes action, and action reinforces identity. It becomes a loop you control. Who are you when no one is watching, when there's no recognition waiting on the other side, no praise, no reward, just you, your choices, and the silence that surrounds them? That's where self-respect is built, not under lights, but in shadows. Not when you're performing, but when you're simply living, moment by moment, with quiet integrity. It's easy to act strong when people are paying attention. It's easy to speak well when applause follows. But the real transformation, it happens when you choose to do the right thing, even when no one will ever know. When your actions align with your values, not because someone might see, but because you see, you know, and that knowing becomes your compass. Socrates said, "The soul is dyed the color of its thoughts, but it's also dyed by its habits, the things you do repeatedly when there's nothing to gain." That's what determines your inner architecture. You don't build trust in yourself by talking big. You build it by being consistent in the dark, by following through on the promises you make to yourself in private. Because that kind of consistency, that quiet loyalty to your own principles, is where unshakable self-respect is born. When you learn to show up without needing a witness, your strength becomes internal. You stop performing. You stop needing to prove. You simply are. And when that happens, even the loudest criticism starts to sound like background noise, irrelevant, temporary, powerless. Stop shrinking. Stop tucking parts of yourself away just to make others comfortable. And stop apologizing for your ambition, for wanting more, reaching further, standing in your truth. Ambition isn't something to hide. It's not arrogance. It's clarity. It's that internal knowing that you're meant for something meaningful, but somewhere along the way, you were taught that striving made you selfish, that confidence made you threatening. That was never about you. That was about their comfort. Real humility doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to stay rooted. It doesn't mean hiding your gifts. It means offering them with grace. Socrates said, "To find yourself, think for yourself." When you do, you'll realize humility is not shrinking back. It's stepping forward without needing to be the loudest in the room. Courage isn't about noise. It's about presence. It's choosing to live in alignment with what matters most, even when it's unpopular, even when it's hard. You don't need to draw attention to yourself, but you do need to stop pretending your voice doesn't matter. You weren't made to fade into the background. You were made to contribute, to build, to speak, to model what integrity looks like in a noisy world. And that doesn't mean being aggressive or showy. It means being grounded. It means acting with intention, living with dignity, and standing up for your values with calm conviction. You don't need to be praised to be powerful. You don't need to be celebrated to be significant. Your worth isn't measured by applause. It's measured by how faithfully you show up, day after day, for the things and people that matter. Fear is not the enemy. It never was. What holds you back isn't fear itself. It's how tightly you grip it, how often you believe it without question, how silently you let it dictate your choices. Fear only becomes a problem when you let it steer the wheel without ever asking where it's taking you. It grows strongest in silence, in the places you avoid, in the stories you don't challenge. So challenge it, sit with it, talk to it. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Not in a vague, general sense, but specifically. Is it failure? Is it being misunderstood? Is it starting over and having to admit the last path wasn't right for you? Most of the time, what we fear isn't even life-threatening, it's ego-threatening. It's discomfort, it's uncertainty, it's being seen in a way we can't control. But that's exactly where growth lives. Carl Jung said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." Fear isn't a stop sign, it's a spotlight. It points you toward the places in your life that are still ruled by limitation instead of freedom. If something scares you and excites you at the same time, pay attention. That's the edge of your potential calling. And if you're not at that edge once in a while, if everything feels safe, familiar, easy, you're probably not growing. Growth doesn't happen in the absence of fear. It happens in your willingness to move forward despite it. So stop waiting to feel fearless. That day doesn't come. Instead, learn to walk with fear beside you, not behind it, not under it, but shoulder to shoulder. Let it be a signal, not a sentence. Let it teach you, not trap you. Discipline isn't punishment. It's not restriction. It's not about being hard on yourself or stripping joy from your life. It's the opposite. It's liberation. It's the quiet power of structure, the freedom that comes from knowing you can count on yourself when things get loud, messy, or uncertain. When everything around you feels out of control, discipline is the steady rhythm that keeps you anchored. Think about it. When you train your mind to focus, when you move your body even when you don't feel like it, when you choose consistency over comfort, you're not limiting your life. You're creating space within it. You're telling your nervous system, we've got this. And that inner trust, that's peace, that's stability, that's strength. Motivation is great, but it's a visitor. It comes and goes. Discipline is what stays behind when motivation disappears. It's what holds you up when inspiration fails. It's what reminds you that your worth isn't based on how you feel in the moment. It's built on the choices you make over time. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Make your routines sacred, not rigid, not perfect, but intentional. Let them be your anchor, your reminder. Because on the days when doubt creeps in, when everything feels foggy, when you forget who you are, those routines will speak for you. They'll say, "I know who I am because I show up for myself." And that, more than anything, is what discipline really is. A daily act of self-respect. You've waited too long to feel ready. You've been holding out for the right mood, the perfect timing, the green light from someone else that says, "Now you can begin." But readiness isn't a feeling that magically arrives. It's something you create by stepping forward, even when your legs are shaking. The truth is, you're already becoming. Not in some dramatic, visible way that everyone notices, but quietly, daily. In the moments where you chose integrity over ease, patience over reaction, effort over excuse. Through every decision you made that no one clapped for. The ones you didn't post about. The ones you weren't even sure mattered. Those are the ones shaping you. The person you admire, that version of you who moves with confidence, clarity, and inner steadiness, they're not some far-off fantasy. They're not waiting at the finish line. They're already within you, waiting to be uncovered. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You don't need to become someone else. You need to stop running from who you already are when you're at your most honest. That version of you is close, so close, closer than you think. They're one aligned choice away, one moment of courage, one step in the direction you keep delaying. And when you stop underestimating that truth, when you finally realize that growth is already happening inside of you, everything shifts. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop waiting for permission. You start walking with purpose. You begin acting like the person you've always been capable of becoming. And once you do that, there's no going back. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming every single day in ways the world may never see, but your future self will thank you for. Keep going. The quiet strength you're building now is going to speak louder than anything you've ever said. If this spoke to something real in you, there's another video on the screen right now that'll take you even deeper. Let it be your next step. Thank you for being here and for being a part of Stoic Journal. This space isn't about perfection. It's about progress, purpose, and quiet power.